Good morning, Bill, on this wintry Geelong morning.
Well, yes, Mark. I walked here this morning to this meeting and had the beanie on.
You did?
And I think yesterday I heard it was -1 in Geelong, which is a bit of a... But, life goes on, Mark, and they keep talking about interest rates and all sorts of things. But I just thought I'd probably show my age here. I'll go back a bit. The building we're in this morning is the old wool stores on the waterfront at Geelong, right next to the convention centre, which is going up like a rocket, because I know my daughter's actually one of the project managers there. She said they're flat out. But I think when I was a kid, these were wool stores, and the kids, we used to come down here and they used to lift, because it's a multi-storey building, they used to lift the wool bales up on an elevator. And we used to ride the elevators as kids up to the top of the wool stores. And I guess that was my early memory of this building. But now it's certainly changed, and Deaconwell, truly entrenched, and they've done a fantastic renovation.
And now we're sitting inside the offices for the Committee for Geelong with Michael Johnston. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And a great little setup.
It is. It's very good.
It's nicely done, and on a nice sunny day you'd be able to see across the bay, but today it's a bit murky out there. But anyway, that's what it is. So, Michael, the usual starting point, where was primary school?
I went to Bel Air Primary School in Highton.
Ah, okay.
Not far away,
Not
Mark.
far away.
Not far away at all.
It's almost a stone's throw of here. That's amazing. And school life, where did you sort of juggle to?
Yeah, so we obviously grew up in Highton, used to be able to enjoy walking to school. I recently found out that the crossing lady, the lollipop lady on South Valley Road that was there when I was a kid, is still there working away. I don't know, amazing longevity. But grew up in Highton, was at Bel Air. It was a great place to knock about with my mates, and a great part of life. My family, we'd moved down from Wangaratta when I was about 2, so I've got no memory of living there, but we'd settled in, and it was a great home base. So progressed from Bel Air on to Geelong College, where I started in Year 7 and went through my schooling there through high school, and then progressed on to Deakin University. So I was out at Warren Ponds and did a double degree in commerce law.
So, Michael, at school, what other activities did you take part in?
Oh, look, I loved my sport, Bill. Loved playing footy, loved playing cricket, had a little dalliance with basketball there, which was probably not my sport despite the height. So that was a lot of my time, was particularly when I got to high school. I was playing school football, I was playing local football at South Barwon. That was 4 nights a week plus Saturdays, and I loved it.
Yeah, well, of course, you had a magnificent oval there at Geelong College, didn't you?
Very nice oval.
The Geelong College.
The Geelong College, indeed.
Right.
Yes. It was a great school, great facilities, obviously, and very fortunate to have been given that sort of start in life.
And whilst you're in secondary school, did you have any part-time jobs?
I did. My first job was like a lot of kids, I'm sure, that were growing up in the 1990s, where I used to deliver the Geelong Independent on school after school on a Friday afternoon.
It's a bit sad that all that's gone, isn't it?
All that is gone. It was a little enterprise, though. I did it I was pretty good, and I lasted for quite a while, but I had a very large delivery area. It was pretty much everything from sort of Thornhill Road, but going down as far as towards Marcus Oldham, up to basically Wandana Heights, and I think the area eventually got me, because the only way I was able to do it was my mum and maybe my older sister or something, helping fold
and
the
a hilly
papers
area too.
Very hilly, and trying to do it on a bike.
Yeah, Mark, you remember we interviewed somebody a long time. Our friend down in Hamilton with the garlic business, and he was telling a story about delivering papers on a bike, and he had 2 side saddles on the back of his bike, and he had to walk up hills and all the rest of it. It's amazing how that experience for kids in those days can never be repeated.
Indeed. So.
And the sad part is too that the demise of local papers. Yes, you can get them online, but it's not the same. It's not. I just don't think you get that connection that you used to get out of a local paper and finding out what was going on and who was doing what. But anyway, that's what happens in the world. So you did your double degree.
Yep.
Where was your first real job?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was someone who actually quite enjoyed having part-time jobs. So even when I was at uni, I made my first sort of then into a proper job was in hospitality, and I was at the old Aberdeen Chateau, which you both probably remember before it was demolished and turned into some prime Newtown real estate there. But I used to work behind the bar there. The owners also had another business that they set up with a furniture shop there on the old Rory Street Market. Right. So I used to be getting in, unloading shipping containers and helping with deliveries and little repair jobs on the furniture there. And then I jumped into retail, and I had a job at Foot Locker in the Westfield there. It was basically Plaza when I started, and also did some stuff down at Quicksilver down in Torquay. So very much got a lot of different skills while studying. My first sort of foray into a little bit of management as well. Spent a summer working full-time at Foot Locker, and was sort of assistant manager in there and given a bit more responsibility, but finished off my uni degree, spent a bit of time overseas, came back and was fortunate enough to land a role as a paralegal at Coulter Roach, as it was then, now Coulter Legal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow.
So that was my first proper job, and then that led down into a path into law, which was almost by accident. I hadn't necessarily thought that I would progress a legal career. I did a commerce law degree, but had more interest in the commerce side. Yeah. Economics was my major. Found that really interesting. Law was sort of that might be something that's helpful for me at some point in my career. And then, funnily enough, found myself actually working in a law firm. Was there for about 6 months, and was asked would I consider applying for my article clerkship. And I didn't really know what else I was going to do, so I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great. So I did that, and I was there for about 10 months, and started getting close to being admitted to practice, and was offered a job as a junior solicitor. So yeah, okay, great, sounds great. Still not quite sure if that was what I wanted to do. And look, I did that for then about another 3 years, and found that I really enjoyed the nature of the work, save for budgeting and billing, which was 6-minute increments of your life, is quite hard yards.
I was reading a legal bill during the week, Michael, and it was in those increments as well. But so, okay, Mark, as we talk about tipping points and sliding doors, what tipped you into making a decision to change careers?
Yeah, look, it was probably a period where there's a lot of people that drop out of the legal profession at that 3-year mark, and I think I just had reached that period where I just felt like maybe this wasn't what I wanted to do for the next, 30 plus years of my life. I saw a job advertised. It was actually at the Geelong Footy Club, and I looked at it, and I was in no means qualified for that, but I looked at that and went, geez, that'd be a really good job to have one day. And I don't think that the path I'm on is going to get me there. And I started thinking about, well, maybe something to do with sport might be an area of interest. I was doing a bit of increasing number of clients that were in the sporting field, and I spoke to some people who were working in the industry and asked about how they got in, and that led to an opportunity coming up with the Australian Sports Commission in Canberra, so the federal government body that basically provides grant funding out to national sporting organisations and administers and runs the Australian Institute of Sport. So
big change.
Big change. So
well, yeah, it is a big change. But and I read as we sneak through the internet looking to find out more that you are sort of focusing on legal and governance in a big way.
I did. So I had a really different skill set to a lot of people coming in, where I think for some people trying to get into sport, they sort of think that you have to be, you're wearing tracksuits and have to know how to be more in the high performance side of it. I went into what was a smallish sort of team within the commission that really focused around driving improved organisational capability within funded national sporting bodies. So I came in and filled a very specific role that was looking at particularly improving corporate governance practices. I'd done a lot of commercial legal work in my 5 odd years in the legal field, and so that got in, and it was just the perfect environment for me. I really enjoyed working in that government environment. It was government, but it was a little bit different because it was not within a department. You were within a standalone agency. You have a minister, but you also have a board. So it's quite different. You're getting to work with a lot of different national sporting bodies and enjoying sort of that side of it. But it was really really eye-opening in terms of the Australian sporting industry and how it sort of all operates.
And making lots of connections at the same time. But so you moved to Canberra?
Moved to Canberra.
So What did you find in that sort of lifestyle and everything by moving out of Geelong, going to Canberra, because there's one hell of a difference?
It is. Look, it is and it isn't, I would say, in terms of towns go. It was a very... I can see why people maybe from Sydney, or even other, Melbourne can struggle at times making the transition. That was something I really noticed with people you worked with. The people from Sydney often didn't last because it was a much smaller town and you were close enough to get home on a weekend. If you're from Melbourne, you sort of had to throw yourself a little bit more into it and develop some networks. From Geelong, it was just a slightly bigger city, really. Like, it had a lot of the similar feels. And it's been really quite informative for me, in a sense, coming into this role now, because I feel like Canberra's probably... where Geelong is now in its growth is almost where Canberra was when I moved there. It was experiencing that disruption of going from a place where you can just drive from point A to point B in 20 minutes or less and get a park out the front. They were really starting to go down the path of having to invest more heavily into their public transport infrastructure with the creation of their metro line. Seeing that population growth, and it was actually a really enjoyable part of my life. We were there for, I took my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and we got married whilst we were living up there. We had our 2 daughters while we were living up there, and it was a really great environment to raise kids.
Canberra's an interesting place. You either love it or hate it, I think. Yeah. I spent 6 months putting the Target store into the Civic Centre, and on winter's mornings, walking into a building site, we had 3 layers of socks on because of the bare concrete. Yep. But I really enjoyed it because what I learnt was the good eating in Canberra, fantastic eating in Canberra, but unless you're a bit of a local, you don't know where it is because it's tucked all over the place.
Everything is tucked everywhere. I remember driving around when we did a little recce sort of trip up before we moved, trying to find places, and it was just you're on a highway or an arterial road driving through the bush, and then there's an exit and you get off and you're suddenly in a little suburb. And the whole concept of the town centres and having diversified and spread out, and everything's been planned, obviously, which is quite a great environment to be in. But that gave me some wonderful exposure and experience into government. My role changed a few times while I was there. Was fortunate, I guess, to be at the forefront of governance reform within the industry. As I said, I was one of a team of about 5. By the time I left, I was heading up a branch of about 50 staff that were looking at developing capability across the entirety of a sport business. And there'd been some policy changes within government in the way that the biggest one being they gave up control of running high performance programs. So the old AIS that I think a lot of people in their mind of, all the athletes going into Canberra and having all the coaches on the payroll of the AIS, that went in 2012 through the Australia's Winning Edge policy or strategy, and that saw money handed out to national sporting bodies. So you had a lot of, fairly immature governance structures, organisations.
A lot of governance required.
A lot of governance required. So I went from being one man to suddenly heading up a team and playing an important role in there.
And then did you go straight into Hockey Australia after that?
I did.
Yeah, so how'd that happen?
Yeah, okay. So I'd been at the Commission for, I think it was about 7.5 years. Had started getting to that point of thinking about, well, what might be next, and our kids were getting a bit closer to school age, and my wife and I... I've often told this story, but when I left Geelong, I had no ambition to ever return to Geelong. And I think I've told the story a few times about being just up the road at the edge. And first time I came back to visit and was with my mates, and you're ever going to move back to Geelong? Oh, mate, if I move back to Geelong, I've failed at life, right? Like that's how it felt. And then bringing that fast forward, just coming back, visiting mum and dad, sort of wandering around the laneways, down Geelong, looking at my wife, just going, this is actually feeling a bit different. There's some cool stuff happening here. And I think by about 2015, we were feeling far more open to making a move back, and it'd just be if the opportunity came up. And that opportunity came in 2017, where there was a new CEO came in at the Commission. She'd come in and basically provided me the opportunity to come back down and be the senior figure in the Melbourne office. There was a bit of further restructuring happening, and it didn't quite go as planned, but it got us back here. And once we were here, I did it for about 12 months, but there was a lot of commuting back to Canberra, and it was not great when you got young kids. So, the guy by the name of Matt Favier, who had been the AIS director, had when I was working at the Commission, had then moved across to hockey as their CEO. They had a role in their exec team, and made the jump into sport administration proper, which was interesting for a bloke who's never picked up a hockey stick in his life.
So that job you looked at the Geelong Cats, which was a sporting job, you actually got there then by sorting where you were going and how you were going to
it was
get
a
there.
meandering sort of way to get there, but eventually sort of cracked it into working in sport, which was a really. I felt a lot more prepared than had I, and I look back with so much gratitude that I didn't make that jump initially in, because I think if I had I would have probably lasted a year or two and got spat out and come out the other side and been quite jaded by it. That experience I had working with the Commission was fantastic, because I've got a whole range of experience around government and operating within a government context that I never sort of went in expecting, and that's proved so useful through life generally. But it gave me the absolute eyes wide open of what to expect within the
Michael,
sporting industry.
what do you think was the biggest learning you got out of working at Hockey Australia?
So once I got into Hockey Australia, it was stakeholder management. You're operating in a federated environment, so you've got your national body, your members are the 8 state and territories. You've then got, I think it was about 1,000 hockey clubs around.
Which creates its own problems.
Well, it does. And so
opportunities.
My role was basically heading up. So that was part of my responsibility, was managing all of those stakeholder relationships to try and get some strategic alignment through the federation, which was partly trying to grow the game. So you've got about 100,000 odd people play hockey a year, so you're watching that like a number of other Olympic type of sports where you just don't have the resources to be able to compete with your AFLs and crickets of the world who are throwing billion-dollar broadcast deals into their game development. And so the only way you can really try and compete is to be far more effective in your rollout and your decision making. So stakeholder management was absolutely critical. And look, we were able to achieve some really fantastic outcomes for the sport in the time I was there. It was through a really difficult period, obviously, where in the middle of that 5-year-old period I was in there. You had a pandemic which shut everything down for a period. The Hockey Roos, the famous women's national team, had a fairly publicised cultural issue that,
as a lot of sports
do. After the postponed Tokyo Games, that led to pretty much a boom going through the organisation, where you saw the president, the CEO, the high performance director and the men's national coach, as well as a couple of other members of the exec team, moved on. I found myself suddenly operating out of my house in Geelong as the interim CEO for 6 months during a pandemic at the back of the actual last Olympic Games. So it was a very interesting support, but it was an amazing experience.
All right, well, you jumped ship. Tell us about that again.
The next tipping point. The next tipping point. So, so that period came up. So, as I said, I had that opportunity to sit in a CEO chair. And that was, I guess, probably when you're talking to the aspiration. When I started off working at the Sports Commission, part of me had always thought, it'd be great to be the CEO of a sporting organisation. And hockey was a great organisation, really proud sport, good sized business, gave me great way to do it, but also the safety net of going in for as a 6-month interim, where you get all the experience and all the pressure without necessarily the obligation of being the permanent person. So that gave me a taste, and that gave me the confidence to go, look, I'm actually ready to go into a CEO role in my own right. If that doesn't happen, I'm probably feeling pretty ready to find something in Geelong. I've been doing the commute to Melbourne now for 5-6 years. I've had a taste, like a lot of people had through COVID, of not having to go every day. And so I just became receptive, I guess, to if there were opportunities that came up. I was in a really nice position that I didn't have to... I liked my job. I'd been given a bit more responsibility as part of a key member of the exec team there. But if the right opportunity came up, and I just happened to see this position come up at the committee for Geelong, I was really late to the party. I think it had been out for like a month.
Okay, yep.
I contacted Marie Herith from
Marie
Harvest.
we
all know Marie, and said, hey, I've just seen this. I'm like, is it too late? And she was already doing shortlisting interviews. And was like, if you can get me a CV tomorrow, I can have a look at it. And so then it happened really quickly. We went from to shortlisting, met with a few members of the board, and I was really fortunate, I think, in terms of I could see really clearly how my background and skills would fit neatly into this role, and it was just one of those fortunate moments where our chair, Clive Pugh, is really well experienced, but had part of his experience in life was he'd spent time sitting on the board of Shooting Australia, so he understood that national sporting organisation environment, and that I think really helped in terms of selling that message that you're dealing with a variety of complex stakeholders. You're trying to develop
Yep.
a long-term strategy where you're getting lots of agreement. You're trying to figure out how to navigate government and the decision-making process there, and agitate for funding to be directed into things. And they're all skills I developed through my working life, and I felt ready to bring them to the committee.
Now, just recently last week, as I mentioned before, we interviewed the CEO of the Geelong Chamber of Commerce, and there's certainly some major changes going on there. We interviewed Jen out at Geelong Manufacturing Council. Where does the Committee for Geelong sit in the Geelong environment?
Yeah, so that was probably the biggest thing I had to get my head around when I came into was coming into the role. We've got all these different advocacy bodies, and who's really responsible for what. And I look at Jen and Jeremy, and they've got a really specific focus on their particular subset. That's the manufacturing sector or the small business sector, and they're really targeted around providing development opportunities and growth and support for those types of businesses. They're there to advocate on behalf of those types of businesses. Probably Julia Baggio and myself have got a more similar remit in terms of the committee in G21, looking at a more general level. I feel like ours is probably a little bit more business focused and is more targeted to a more concentrated area of Geelong. But I look at, and I guess that experience of having come through sport, of working in membership-based organisations, is ultimately we represent 130 odd member organisations who are a mixture of probably 3/4 business, and most of those are medium to large business. We also have a good range of another quarter of our membership base community organisations, and I think that gives us a really good mix of views and opinions to put forward into our policy positions. But I see my job every day of getting up and representing an organisation that's been around for over 20 years, that's got a fantastic reputation, a fantastic and important voice that is listened to within government, within decision making. We bring people together, we connect people and their ideas and opportunities, and that's what gets me out of bed every morning.
What strikes me, Bill, is we've now interviewed all 4 of the CEOs.
That's correct.
And you'd have to say they're all in good hands.
I'd certainly agree with that. And because in the past, I have been critical of who's who in the zoo and why have we got so many bodies such as yours and others. And I think we've come to understand that a bit better, that each body does have its, what I call, target market, so to speak. But just jumping into another question is, where's Geelong going at the moment in your eyes?
Oh, look, I think it's an exciting period. I look at Geelong's history, and I would describe this as being the third great boom period in Geelong's existence. We've been consistently over the last decade, number 1 or number 2 fastest growing region in the country. You only need to look at the recent release a couple of weeks ago of the government's LGA by LGA housing targets under their housing statement. That's 139,500 new dwellings in the city of Greater Geelong in the next 26 years. That's doubling, or more than doubling, our population in the next 26 years. And that's numbers bigger when you pick up the entire G21 region. There is enormous growth happening. That is a good problem to have. There are a lot of regional cities across the country that have had a demise in some key employment sectors and industry that would be looking on enviously at the ability to have been able to reinvent and recover the way that Geelong has and to grow. So that is really, from a medium to long-term perspective, I'm looking at Geelong's growth, and it's just exciting. And the biggest challenges with growth, though, come down to some of those things that we're not seeing enough investment into critical infrastructure, particularly around transport infrastructure for the city for its growth. And we understand why, with the government's obviously working through its post-pandemic debt, but that is inhibiting growth, and a lot of money being directed into projects like Suburban Rail Loop. We're increasingly seeing, I guess, the divide, as well as there's more wealth coming into Geelong. We still also have the 2 poorest suburbs in the state, and that doesn't sit well with Geelong people. Geelong, we feel like as a city, right, that there's a sense of we want everyone to have a fair go.
Look, I agree. It's on the move. There's certainly no doubt about that. I guess one of the biggest issues I've noticed since I've come back to Geelong, and one of the reasons I walked here this morning, Mark, is the traffic. We're stuck. We've got Shannon Avenue, we've got Latrobe Terrace, and they're the only two through roads through the city. And then we've got the ring road, and you and I both sit on an economic development pillar at G21, and I believe that's going to be one of our biggest issues going forward.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. It is. And you look at what's driving people here in numbers, it's a lifestyle. People are drawn here from Melbourne, and we're seeing this amazing mix now of people, those 18 to 45-year-olds who, in the past were people like me that were, let's get the hell out of here and never come back. And now it's not only people returning back, they're people that are moving here that maybe grew up in other regional centres and don't want Melbourne, they want to come here. But what's most noticeable is got people who've got no connection to the city coming from Melbourne and relocating here. We're already seeing pricing pressures now on housing, so the concept that Geelong is, it's dirt cheap compared to Melbourne. Yeah, like in pockets it is, but in other parts, a house and land package in Armstrong Creek's now outpricing parts of Melbourne. Yep. Right? We're seeing that. And the transport, you mentioned the G21 work. Contributors towards the integrated transport strategy last year have been really pushing that hard, and that statistic of 490% increase in peak hour commute times within the next 15 years if we don't do anything is horrifying. I normally always walk into the office, and I drove in today because I had to go out off-site for a meeting. I got halfway up my street and had to just end up pulling over because there'd been a bingle on Latrobe Terrace, and it was I'm not going to get to the office. I
saw the ambulance up there as I walked here. That's right.
So I jumped out of the car and was able to just walk in and still get in 15 minutes.
And how old are your children?
I've got an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. They're in grade 6 and grade 4.
So you're back into sport by default, aren't you?
I'm back into sport by default. Yes. No. My sporting journey was interesting in that as I said, I love my footy and cricket. I found that I probably was someone who enjoyed the sport more than I was better at it. I found myself getting into, if I sort of look back as well, full circle on some of the career choices I've made. I was a 19-year-old and I was the secretary of my cricket club. Really early days down at Alexander Thompson there in Highton. And similarly, when I finished playing footy up in Canberra, I was at the Ainslie Footy Club. Next thing you know, I'm coaching a team. Next thing you know, I'm on the board there. So I've been someone who's always thrown myself into it. When I moved back to Geelong, I ended up getting coerced into helping out with some coaching down at St Joey's footy club. So I've got now my girls coming through. I've got one, well, they both play netball. I've got one down at Newtown, so she's just starting to get involved. But look, you follow your kids around to their activities. And
one of the interesting things about Geelong, and I've got some grandkids in exactly the same, playing netball at Newtown, and another one playing for Jumping Joey's in the under-10s or whatever it is. But the thing about kids in Geelong is that they don't necessarily play for the school. They play in the districts, and they meet everybody and everyone, and it's a real diverse culture, and it's just good to see, and it's never, other than going to Ocean Grove, Mark, or somewhere like that, it's never far away to go to a game. But
I have copped that away, those netball games down at Ocean Grove, when you see them come up from the fixture, and I tell you what, there's like a 440 or 450 game that you've got to get to, and that's hard yards after school.
So Michael, just to sort of wrap up, Committee for Geelong, where, if people want to find out more about membership or get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Oh, look, we've... website's obviously the best place to go. It's just gone through an update. I mean, for people that are looking to engage with the committee, always on the lookout for members to jump on board. Never been a more important time. Geelong is facing some major opportunities, and the biggest challenge to us fulfilling our growth potential is a lack of investment. So I always say that the strength of the committee is the calibre of the member organisations that stand behind us and the leaders of those organisations. So if you're a local business that's been involved in the past, or you're looking to get involved, then please reach out. Always happy to have a conversation and a coffee and talk about how we can support you. There's also some of the work that the committee does, and one of the key things we probably haven't delved into a lot today has been within our community leadership development, and the Leaders for Geelong program's been going strong for 18 years.
Very well respected.
Very well respected program. I've been overwhelmed with the number of people I've met through this role that have gone through that program, and it just really instills that sense of leadership. And it gets back to why we were set up and who we were. And you look at the Frank Costas who were involved at the time, community leaders who wanted to give back. because they understand the value of it. So we have opportunities with our Leaders for Geelong program. Before we know it, we'll be recruiting for next year's 12-month program, but we also have our shorter 8-week programs. Our next Activate program is, depending on when this airs, recruiting at the moment, but there's a couple of those a year as well, and also keeping an eye out for some of our events that we'll have in the later part of the year. But website, feel free to pop into the office here. We're down on Western Beach Road, just near the corner of Jerringham Street and sort of next to the cafe at Deakin.
Fantastic, Michael. So brilliant. Great to know more about you
Thank
and
you.
the great work of the committee.
Well done, Michael. And like said, your kindred associations, there's a lot of good work being done in Geelong.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
There's some great. I think you're right. There
Yeah.
are some great people leading those organisations, and what I've really enjoyed is the chance to get to know all of those other people and work with them really collaboratively. And I feel like we've got the right mix at the moment of people in these sorts of roles who want to just work together for the greater good.
Good. Fantastic. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, guys.